Electronisounds Audio, the YouTube channel for you.
Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Dean from Electronisounds. Stick around. Today, we're going to be talking about my new drum and bass live set. I'm going to share with you how I put it together, and I'm going to share with you how I'm controlling it. Let's get into this. Okay, so first things first, why did I put together a 20-minute drum and bass set? A friend of mine named Mark the Acid Clown Gardener put on a live streaming festival on Facebook about a month or so ago called Clownfest, where electronic music artists from around the world put on 20-minute live sets for about 7 hours straight. It was absolutely amazing, and when he announced that he was going to put together a second Clownfest that was going to be a 3-day online music festival, I knew that I had to take part and get a slot, and that's why I put together this set. Let's talk specifically about the individual pieces that I chose and why I chose to use them. As most of you know, if you're already following my channel, I'm a sample maker, and sound design and using samples is kind of my bag. So the opportunity to put together a live set using samples only, using some of these Electron boxes that I love and that I've been making sound banks for, was really an amazing opportunity to see just how far I could push these boxes. What I've got here is I've got 2 Electron Digitacs. These are both sampling groove boxes. They don't contain sounds or synthesis on their own. They only play back the samples that you load into them. Next, over here on this side, we've got 2 Electron model model samples. These are, again, just kind of a slimmed down version of the Digitact, and they allow you to get in and load some samples and use the really awesome Electron sequencing features and sample locking and whatnot at a much lower introductory price point. I picked one of these up so that I could start making sound banks for it, for Electronisounds, but I ended up falling in love with the workflow so much that now I've got two Digitacs and 2 model samples so that I can really expand the workflow and what I'm doing here. What I've done is I've put together individual grooves inside of these boxes. I put together individual drum and bass grooves in the first Digitact, and I put together individual drum and bass grooves in the second Digitact, and then I'm using the model samples together as a pair. So these are 8-track samplers. Each of the Digitacts can load, 8 tracks of samples, whereas the model samples can load 6 tracks of samples. So it's a little bit more limited. When I went to start, putting these grooves together, it was really apparent right off the jump that I was really going to need that second model samples to achieve all of the, thick layers and build-ups and get that ebb and flow in the set moving the way that I wanted it to. What I'm doing here is I'm running each of these boxes into the Allen & Heath X1 DB2 DJ mixer. I'm not a DJ per se, but this is a really amazing and quality way to sort of like route all of my boxes together in a live situation and give me a little bit more control over the levels and being able to do some transitions between the grooves, which we're going to get into in just a little bit. Over here we've got the Akai MPC Live, which I'm only using to trigger vocal samples in this jam. I literally have 4 separate banks, each with different vocal samples that I can go to back and forth between the set and hit those in real time. And then last but not least, we're taking the main output of everything in total and we're running that into the Pioneer Remix 1000. I've done a video on this box specifically. I'll put a link up here in the corner in case you want to get deeper into what this box does and how I'm using it. But basically what I'm doing here is I'm able to create some transition effects and some like glitch and stutter effects that just sort of help add some life to the set in real time. Okay, next up, let's talk about how I started putting together the grooves. One of the things that I assumed right from the jump was that as soon as I hit that live button, that 20 minutes was going to feel like an hour. And I didn't want the set to sort of drag out and like sort of feel stale or get boring. So I decided right off the jump, right in the beginning, that rather than try to create and play back like full length actual tracks that would go on for 5-6 minutes per track, that how I would approach this would be to create as many individual grooves as I could, and then DJ and sort of mix back and forth between those grooves. And that's how I approach this. I went ahead, and the very first thing I did was I started putting together a brand new drum and bass sound pack for the model samples. And I did get that one finished. It's called Drum and Bass Fuel, and it's available on my website, Electronisounds.com. I took my absolute favorite patterns from the model samples drum and bass fuel pack, and I extended those out and started, combining them with more sounds and adding more effects and whatnot in the second model samples and fleshing those out. In the end, I ended up with 3 different grooves in the first digitact, 3 different grooves in the second digitact, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 5 grooves in the set of model samples. So like 11 different grooves that I'm able to mix back and forth between in real time. Some of them are a little bit longer than others. Like some of the grooves are like 3 patterns long. Some of the grooves are more like 4 or 5 different patterns long. But having the amount of different patterns that I could switch back and forth between in real time, I knew that that would keep the excitement level and the energy level and help prevent the audience from getting bored. And as well as, being able to create a new sound pack for the model samples in the journey as well. Okay, let's talk about how I'm keeping everything in sync. I figured that since I'm not really a DJ, it might be the best idea if I wrote all of the patterns at the same tempo and at the same key. That way I can freely go back and forth between any of the patterns at any time and just sort of know that everything is going to gel together and not create like jarring transitions or strange key changes that don't really make sense to the audience. What we've done here is I'm taking a MIDI out from the first digitact. This is basically the master of my set here, and I'm taking a MIDI out from this behind the scenes. We're going into a quadra through from MIDI Solutions. This allows me to send the exact same MIDI clock signal out to 4 different boxes simultaneously. So I'm sending it to the second digitact. I'm sending it to the model samples here and the model samples here. We're also sending MIDI clock to the Akai MPC Live to keep the delay on those vocal samples in time with the rest of my set. So when I press play on the first digitact, everything will start playing automatically. Okay, let's talk about the actual patterns here. How we go about this is that if I press the pattern button on the digitact, it lights up which patterns actively have information in them. So we can see here that in the default state, I've got a pattern in 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And then down beneath it, I've got a pattern in 9, 10, and 11. And this is how I approach the patterns in the digitact. I've got, each groove basically is a series of patterns, and they're one beneath each other. So this is bank 1, okay? Now if I go to bank 2, if I hit bank and we go to bank 2, you can see that I've got 3 patterns in bank 2. So there's my full 3 grooves inside of the first digitact, okay? And we can see if I go back to bank 1 here, that, pattern 1 is based on 4 patterns. Pattern, groove 2 here down at the bottom is based on these 3 patterns. And if we go to the next pattern, bank 2, we can see that it's based on 3 patterns here. How I did this, and this kind of helped me keep track of time for the set, is every single pattern plays 4 times through for a total of 16 bars. So every 16 bars for 20 minutes, I'm doing a pattern change, which was really difficult to keep track of at the beginning, and took about a month to really get, comfortable being able to switch back and forth. Because when I go to when I switch over on the crossfader, right, to say a different, set of machines here to get a different groove, let's say. So here I have the Digitact 1 and Digitact 2 coming on the X side of my crossfader. So as long as the crossfader is to the left, we're going to hear what sounds are coming out of either Digitact 1 here or Digitact 2 here. Now on the 3 and 4 level faders here. I've got model samples 1 and model samples 2. But remember, these are acting as one unit. So if I have the volume up on Digitect 1 and I'm playing the groove, and then I move the crossfader to the right here, now we're getting volume from both of the model samples. And so now we're playing the groove over here, and I can go ahead and press the pattern button on the model samples, and I can, see here that I've done kind of the same thing as with the Digitact. I don't know if you can see the lights light up here, but when I press pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are lit up in red. That means I've got a pattern on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this first pattern over here is going to be 6 patterns long, and then we have some spaces where there's no patterns, and then another one, which means that's a groove over there, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So we have another 6, patterns groove here. And if I want to switch to the next bank, this is where it gets a little bit confusing in real time, because on the Digitact, you're going to press bank, and you're going to select between the banks. But on the model samples, you're only going to press pattern, and you're going to press 2 to get to bank 2, and then pattern 1, and now I'm in bank 2, pattern 1. And if I, okay, so BO1, and now if I press pattern 1, we can see that in the B bank of patterns that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 patterns here, and then some spaces, and then a separate groove, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over here on the right. So basically, my grooves in the Digitact are sort of laid out on top of each other in 2 rows, but since you have a 16 all the way across here instead of 2 rows of 8, these are the patterns here, whereas they're not 2 rows but just the 1 row, so that I can see, and whenever there's a space between them, I know that this pattern ends. So how this works is I'm jamming along, right? Let's say that I finally get to pattern 5, right? We're over here on BO5, and there's no pattern to go to next. This means that, when the 16 bars is up, it's time to have something ready to go back to on one of these Digitacts, and then I'll do a little transition, and we'll slide the crossfader back over and be ready over here. So at any time during the jam, I can pick any pattern that I've created inside of these boxes, or this box, or this box, and I can do a transition and get to those patterns in real time. I'd like to show you how I'm actually doing these transitions. Over here on the DJ mixer, if we zoom in, hope you can see this, what I've got is I can turn these effects on. I can route any of these channels to either one of these 2 effects tracks. And basically what we've got is we've got a filter that if I turn to the right, it's a high pass filter and removes the low frequency content. And if I turn the filter to the left, it's a low pass filter and it removes the high frequency content. So this is a really typical style of DJ filter, and all I have to do is turn it on and I can start filtering the tracks. Above it is a send to an effects, built-in effects unit up here, which I can select different effects for each channel. On the left channel, I've got a delay effect, and on the right channel, I've got a reverb effect. So how I'm doing these transitions is I'm turning the filter on, and I'm doing a little bit of a high pass filter sweep by rolling the knob up a little bit, and then I'm bringing the effects up with that, okay? And then on the downbeat, I'll be counting it out in my head, and here we are with the bass frequencies removed and a lot of effects coming in, and then I'll just count it out, 2, 3, 4, and we'll slide it over on the 1. Okay, check it out. Okay, so I'm going to count this out for you guys. We're going to go ahead and start the pattern. That's 1 time through, that's 4 bars. That's 2 times through. I'll turn the filter on, and we roll it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, and get that. Over in the other pattern. Let's say I want to switch back to this side. We're going to switch to the same pattern. 2, 3, I'll put the filter on, and then 1, and then 2, roll it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 2, 2, 6. So basically, I'm turning the filter on. I'm doing a little bit of lift up on the low frequency content by turning the high pass filter up. And at the same time, I'm rolling the effect up just a little bit to get a little bit, a larger sound in that transition. And when I sweep the crossfader across, it sort of keeps that effect ringing out. So if we, high pass filter over here, and then I bring the reverb up, and then I switch the crossfader over here, this reverb tail kind of trails out over the new groove coming in, and that sort of helps the transitions, be a lot more seamless sounding and less jarring. I also knew right from the beginning that I was going to want to use a whole bunch of custom vocal samples for this set. So I used the Akai MPC Live to be able to trigger these in real time. A few of these were from some of my older sets. The Jamaican sort of raga vocal samples are actually from my Devious Dub Techno sample pack. A good friend of mine named Gasm did a whole bunch of these custom samples for me. I really appreciate that. And then I also went to Fiverr.com and I hired a fellow who does sort of like announcements and DJ voiceovers and whatnot to do some custom announcements for me as well, so that I would really have lots of different variety, and then I could do some shameless self-promotion for Prism Prime during the set. Another huge challenge when putting together this set was trying to keep all of the track levels even and consistent throughout the full set. You might imagine that this would be a pretty huge challenge with 4 individual boxes with very limited tools for doing such a thing. I ended up at the end finding a new use for the Akai Force, and I want to share that with you now. I'm routing the audio from the Pioneer RMX 1000 directly into the Akai Force, and I'm using it as like a master bus. I've got on here a parametric EQ, which is set to shave off all of the super low frequencies below 20 hertz, and it's set to shave off all of the frequencies that are really high above 20,000 kilohertz. It's also got a maximizer on it, which I found super handy because it has a limiter in it. So I was able to boost the overall signal, but also kind of keep a level check on some of those high little peaks that stick out to get the overall set volume a little bit louder and a little bit more consistent, as well as working the individual volumes on all of the tracks here. What I did was I recorded my set in Ableton several times during the month of practice leading up to the actual show, and each time I went through very carefully, and when those you can see in the waveform when like the level is a little bit lower on the next pattern than the last one, or maybe a lot higher than the last one, and I went in and did just a ridiculous amount of individual track level tweaking on all of the grooves over and over again, trying to get it as even and consistent as possible so that I can literally switch between any of these 11 grooves but not have a loud jump in volume or a big drop in volume. And using the Akai Force as like a master bus processor in this case was really a bonus find, and I will definitely be using it in this capacity in the future as well. Let's talk about genres and subgenres of drum and bass. When I was putting this together, I literally didn't pay attention to any of that sort of stuff. I literally grabbed any drum and bass type of vibe, sample, and sound from the last 20 plus years of drum and bass and tried to squeeze it into this set. We've got stuff in here from jungle, we've got stuff in here from neuro bass, we've got stuff in here from liquid drum and bass. You name it, it's in here. I didn't try to adhere to any specific genres when creating, or subgenres rather, when creating these grooves. I literally just tried to throw in as absolute much grab bag variety as I possibly could. Thanks for watching. I hope that this was helpful in some way, and I just want to say one more time to anyone that owns a Digitact and maybe is thinking about purchasing my All Pack Soundbanks bundle. When you purchase the All Soundbanks bundle from here on out, you get the free sample pack of all 284 samples that made up the drum and bass set. So if you like the way that these grooves sound, this is definitely something to look into if you're a Digitact owner. Thanks again for watching.
It's a spiritual experience when you just let go and you get into your body and out of your head.